Stop whatever you're doing and listen to this. You are not weak. You are exposed. Every hesitation you feel, every time you over-explain, every time someone presses you and you fold to keep the peace. That is not your personality. That is programming. Most people never realize this. They think they're indecisive. They think they're emotional. They think they care too much. But the truth is darker. You were trained to be readable, predictable, easy to influence. From childhood, you were rewarded for compliance, punished for resistance, conditioned to seek approval instead of leverage. And the world learned something about you. It learned exactly which emotional buttons to press. Guilt, fear of conflict, desire to be liked, need to be understood. Once someone discovers your buttons, they no longer need strength to control you. They just need timing. Look around. Notice how often people just happen to need something from you. Notice how pressure shows up disguised as politeness. How manipulation hides behind concern. How control wears the mask of kindness. This isn't accidental. This is psychological warfare, and most people are unarmed. Here's the truth nobody tells you. The world does not overpower you. It reads you. It watches how you react, how quickly you explain, how deeply you feel, how easily you justify yourself. And from that data, it builds a strategy around you. This is why some people walk through life untouched, while others are constantly drained, delayed, diminished. It's not luck. It's not confidence. It's not dominance. It's opacity. The most dangerous person in any room is not the loudest, not the angriest, not the most aggressive. It's the one you can't read. The one who doesn't rush to react, who doesn't offer emotional access for free, who doesn't reveal internal pressure. That person is not cold. They are protected. And here's the moment that changes everything. The instant you stop being emotionally transparent, manipulation loses its grip. People can't steer what they can't see. They can't exploit what they can't predict. They can't control what they don't understand. This video is not about becoming cruel. It's about becoming untouchable. If you already know this world feels different than you were taught, like this video now and subscribe. Not for me. For the version of you that refuses to stay exposed. In the next few minutes, you'll learn how influence actually works, how manipulation feeds on visibility, and how to ascend beyond it. Once you see this, you will never move the same way again, because freedom doesn't come from strength. It comes from clarity, and clarity turns the manipulated into the sovereign. Here's why being emotionally readable makes you controllable. The moment someone can predict how you'll react, you are no longer free. Most people believe openness is strength. They wear their emotions on their face. They explain their motives. They confess their doubts. They broadcast their values, hoping to be respected for them. What they don't realize is this. Every visible emotion becomes instruction. When people see what angers you, they know how to provoke you. When they see what guilts you, they know how to pressure you. When they see what you fear losing, they know exactly where to apply leverage. Psychological visibility is not honesty. It is exposure. And exposure creates control. Watch how quickly the world adapts once it understands you. The coworker who suddenly needs help right when you're overwhelmed. The friend who frames requests as moral obligations. The partner who knows exactly which tone will make you retreat. The authority figure who uses disappointment instead of force. None of this is coincidence. Human beings are pattern readers. And once your patterns are obvious, you stop being an individual and become a predictable system. This is why emotional transparency is so dangerous. Not because emotions are weak, but because unfiltered emotion leaks strategy. When you react instantly, you reveal priorities. When you explain yourself, you reveal insecurity. When you rush to clarify, you reveal fear of misunderstanding. When you overcorrect, you reveal where you feel vulnerable. And the world records all of it. People don't need to dominate you physically when they can dominate you psychologically. They don't need to threaten you when guilt already controls you. They don't need to argue when your need for harmony does the work for them. This is how manipulation becomes invisible. You think you're choosing, but the options were shaped long before the moment arrived. The most manipulated people on earth are not the ignorant. They are the emotionally expressive, because expressiveness creates a live map of the inner world. Contrast this with the unreadable individual. Their reactions are delayed. Their expressions are minimal. Their emotions are processed internally, not performed externally. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know what they're feeling. You don't know what will move them. So you hesitate. You test instead of push. You ask instead of assume. You negotiate instead of demand. Not because they're aggressive, but because uncertainty creates respect. Opacity forces people to treat you carefully. This is the first shift you must make. Stop broadcasting your inner state, not by suppressing emotion, but by containing it. You feel anger without displaying it. You feel pressure without rushing. You feel discomfort without explaining. This single discipline changes everything. Because once people lose access to your internal world, they lose their grip on your behavior. They can no longer steer you with tone. They can no longer corner you with urgency. They can no longer manipulate you through emotion. Psychological visibility is the gateway to control. Reduce it, and you don't become colder. You become sovereign. And sovereignty is where true power begins. How guilt, urgency, and niceness are used to bypass your will. Power rarely announces itself as force. It disguises itself as emotion. No one says, "I want to control you." They say, "I'm disappointed." They say, "I thought you were different." They say, "I just really need this right now." And if you're not trained to recognize it, your will collapses before you realize a decision was even made. This is emotional leverage, the quiet art of moving you without touching you. Guilt is the most common entry point. It reframes compliance as morality. You're not choosing to help. You're choosing to avoid being seen as selfish. You're not agreeing because it makes sense. You're agreeing because refusal feels wrong. Notice how guilt always targets identity. A good person would understand. A loyal friend wouldn't hesitate. Someone with a heart would say, yes. The message is clear. Resist. And you become the villain. So you surrender, not because you wanted to, but because your self-image was under attack. Urgency is the second weapon. Urgency collapses thinking. We need an answer now. There's no time to discuss this. If you don't decide immediately, it's gone. Speed becomes pressure. Pressure becomes compliance. Urgency is rarely about necessity. It's about preventing analysis. Because the moment you slow down, the leverage disappears. If something truly matters, it can survive a pause. If it collapses under delay, it was never solid to begin with. Then there's niceness, the most deceptive weapon of all. Niceness creates obligation without agreement. Favors are given before consent. Kindness is used as a down payment. Generosity becomes a ledger. They do something for you, so that saying no later feels impossible. You're no longer responding to the request. You're responding to the debt. This is why some kindness feels heavy. It comes with invisible strings, unspoken expectations, delayed invoices, and once you sense them, you feel trapped. Because rejecting the request now feels like rejecting the person. This is how emotional leverage bypasses logic. You're not deciding based on outcome. You're deciding based on discomfort. The manipulator doesn't need authority. They need access to your emotions, and most people hand it over freely. Here is the shift. Any request that relies on guilt, urgency, or moral pressure is already compromised. A clean request survives neutrality. A fair request survives time. An honest request survives scrutiny. So when you feel rushed, pause. When you feel guilty, examine. When you feel cornered by kindness, step back. You are allowed to disappoint people. You're allowed to say no without justification. You're allowed to take time. These are not acts of cruelty. They are acts of sovereignty. Once you stop reacting emotionally, emotional leverage stops working. And when it stops working, people are forced to meet you honestly, or not at all. That is where power rebalances. If this exposed something you've lived through, comment, sovereign, right now. You're not lacking confidence. You are programmed this way. If you've ever wondered why you hesitate when you should assert, why your first instinct is to explain instead of decide, why saying no feels heavier than saying yes, this is why. You were trained for compliance long before you were trained for power. From the beginning, approval was positioned as safety. Good behavior was rewarded. Obedience was praised. Agreeableness was labeled maturity. You learned early that harmony mattered more than truth, that being liked was more valuable than being respected, that questioning authority carried consequences. So you adapted, not because you were weak, but because adaptation ensured survival. Confidence wasn't discouraged directly. It was subtly reframed. Confidence became arrogance. Boundaries became selfishness. Silence became rudeness. Assertiveness became attitude. And over time, you internalized a dangerous equation. Approval equals security. Disapproval equals risk. Once that equation is installed, your nervous system does the rest. You feel tension before speaking your mind, anxiety before setting limits, guilt before choosing yourself. That discomfort isn't intuition, it's conditioning. You are programmed to prioritize external stability over internal authority. Schools reward compliance, not sovereignty. Workplaces reward predictability, not independence. Social systems reward those who fit, not those who challenge. So the part of you that questions, resists, and asserts was slowly quieted, not erased, suppressed. That's why confidence feels unnatural. That's why power feels risky. That's why decisiveness feels like aggression. You weren't born doubting yourself. You learned it. And here's the part most people never realize. Once a behavior is rewarded enough times, it becomes identity. You don't think, I'm choosing to be agreeable. You think, this is just who I am. That's the final layer of the programming, because when identity is involved, change feels like betrayal, even when the identity is hurting you. This is why advice like, just be confident, fails. You're not dealing with mindset. You're dealing with a system that taught you safety over strength, acceptance over authority, reaction over intention. But systems can be rewritten. The moment you see the pattern, it loses its invisibility. That pause before you explain yourself, conditioning. That urge to soften your words, conditioning. That fear of being misunderstood, conditioning. And once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, who trained me this way? Confidence isn't something you acquire. It's something you recover. Not by becoming louder, not by becoming aggressive, but by unlearning obedience where it no longer serves you. The next section shows how this programming expresses itself in daily behavior. In ways so subtle, most people never notice them happening, and that's exactly why they stay trapped. 500 years ago, long before motivational speeches, long before modern psychology tried to soften human nature, one man observed power without illusions. Machiavelli. He didn't write to inspire you. He wrote to warn you. He watched kingdoms collapse not from weakness, but from misplaced goodness. He saw rulers betrayed not by enemies, but by those they trusted too freely. He studied why men who meant well were replaced by men who understood reality. And instead of preaching morality, he documented mechanics. Machiavelli understood something that still makes people uncomfortable today. The world does not run on how things should be. It runs on how things are. Power is not granted to the most virtuous. It is taken by the most prepared. Respect is not earned through intention. It is enforced through perception and consequence. That's why The Prince was never meant for the masses. It wasn't written for the obedient. It wasn't written for the morally fragile. It was written for those who wanted to survive. For those who wanted to understand the rules that operate beneath the surface of society. The rules people follow instinctively but deny publicly. Machiavelli noticed a pattern. Those who relied on kindness alone were exploited. Those who relied on morality alone were outmaneuvered. Those who trusted appearances were destroyed by them. And those who endured, those who rose, held power, and shaped history, were not the cruelest. They were the clearest. They understood when to be generous and when to be feared, when to show mercy and when to withhold it, when virtue strengthened their position and when it invited attack. Machiavelli never said, "Be evil." That's the lie told by people who never read him. What he actually revealed was far more dangerous. Goodness without strategy is fatal. If you are good, you must also be formidable. If you are kind, you must also be capable of force. If you are moral, you must also understand manipulation, or you will always be a victim of those who do. That's why his work was banned, whispered about, condemned by institutions that benefit from obedience. Because once you understand how power truly works, You stop being controllable. You stop mistaking politeness for loyalty. You stop confusing smiles with safety. You stop trusting systems that only function when you remain predictable. Machiavelli didn't give people hope. He gave them clarity. And clarity is what makes someone unstoppable. Because when you see the game, you're no longer shocked by it. When you understand the rules, you stop playing emotionally. And when you stop playing emotionally, you stop losing by default. This is why his words still survive 5 centuries later. Not because they're comfortable, but because they're true. And now that you know where this knowledge comes from, the next step is understanding how it applies to you. Not kings, not empires, not history books. Your life, your boundaries, your power. In the next few minutes, I'm going to give you 8 principles most people never learn. Not because they're complicated, but because they're uncomfortable. These principles will change how you see power, respect, and influence. They will shift you from someone who explains himself to someone who is respected without explanation, from someone who hopes for fairness to someone who understands leverage. This isn't motivation. This is reprogramming. Once you see these principles, you won't unsee them. And once you understand how influence truly works, going back to naivety won't be possible. These 8 principles will either sharpen you or expose you. So stay with me. Because what comes next doesn't make you nicer. It makes you effective. 1. Transform your inner self. There are 2 selves inside you. One was trained to comply. The other was born to command. The first apologizes too quickly, explains too much, accepts disrespect to avoid conflict. It was programmed early by parents who wanted obedience, schools that rewarded conformity, and a society that fears men who cannot be managed. Machiavelli understood this internal war. He observed that a man who cannot rule himself will always be ruled by others. Power begins internally, not socially. Transformation starts the moment you stop negotiating with weakness. When someone disrespects you, the old self seeks understanding. The new self enforces consequence. When boundaries are tested, the old self explains. The new self acts. This is not cruelty. It is sovereignty. Every time you choose self-respect over approval, the internal hierarchy shifts. Confidence is not loud. It is settled. It does not ask permission. It does not justify its existence. Starve the version of you that seeks validation. Feed the one that expects respect. Once this transformation begins, others feel it before you say a word. And when a man governs himself, the world adjusts accordingly. 2. Build the fortress mind. Most men live emotionally exposed. Every insult wounds them. Every setback derails them. Every opinion shakes their sense of self. That is not sensitivity. It is vulnerability. A fortress mind does not react. It analyzes. Machiavelli warned that those ruled by emotion are predictable, and predictable men are easy to control. Power requires insulation, not emotional numbness, but emotional discipline. When someone criticizes you, the fortress mind does not defend. It extracts information. When betrayal appears, it does not collapse. It records patterns. Pain becomes data. Anger becomes direction. Fear becomes a signal for growth. This is how you become unshakable. The fortress mind expects resistance. It plans for disappointment. It does not rely on hope. It relies on preparation. This is why setbacks hit others like surprise attacks, but barely scratch the strategist. You still feel, but feelings no longer command action. Once your inner world is fortified, no external chaos can penetrate you, and a man who cannot be destabilized cannot be defeated. 3. Master the art of silence. The insecure man speaks to be seen. The powerful man speaks only when necessary. Machiavelli observed that men reveal their weaknesses through their mouths long before they expose them through action. Silence is not emptiness. It is concealment. When you stop explaining yourself, authority rises. When you stop justifying decisions, people stop questioning them. Silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty shifts power in your favor. The loud man tells you everything he fears. The silent man leaves others guessing. This does not mean withdrawal. It means precision. When you speak less, each word carries weight. When you react less, others reveal more. Silence invites projection, and people expose themselves trying to fill it. Those who demand explanations are often seeking leverage. Deny them that access. Machiavelli understood this. Influence grows when others cannot fully read you. Silence protects intention. Silence prevents miscalculation. In a world addicted to noise, the quiet presence dominates the room without effort. 4. Turn setbacks into strength. Disappointment is not an accident. It is an initiation. Most men are shattered by betrayal because they believed illusions. Machiavelli warned that men act in self-interest when pressure arrives, and those who ignore this reality are blindsided by it. Setbacks are revelations. When someone fails you, they show you their true priorities. When support vanishes, you learn where loyalty actually lives. When plans collapse, you discover which foundations were weak. The strategic man does not ask, "Why me?" He asks, "What does this reveal?" Every setback is a lesson paid for in pain. Extract the lesson or pay again. Machiavelli noted that fortune favors those prepared for its cruelty. The man who anticipates adversity is never emotionally ruined by it. Disappointment becomes fuel when you stop romanticizing people and start reading them accurately. Those who survive betrayal without bitterness gain something rare, clarity, and clarity compounds into power. 5. Silence. Critics through excellence. Arguing with critics grants them equality. Excellence removes them from relevance. Machiavelli understood that reputation is not defended, it is demonstrated. Words invite debate. Results end conversation. The insecure man explains. The disciplined man executes. Critics thrive on attention. When you engage them, you validate them. When you outperform them, you erase them. Focus is power. Every minute spent defending yourself is a minute stolen from growth. Build something undeniable. Let progress answer questions you refuse to entertain. When your results become visible, criticism mutates into envy. And envy is respect that lacks courage. Machiavelli warned against wasting energy on those who gain from your distraction. The most effective response to doubt is visible dominance in your domain. Let excellence speak in a language no one can interrupt. 6. Control your reputation. People judge before they understand, and they rarely revise first impressions. Machiavelli observed that men are ruled more by appearance than reality. Ignore this truth, and you surrender control. Use it, and perception becomes your shield. Reputation is not ego. It is positioning. Speak less. Reveal less. Move deliberately. Mystery creates gravity. Predictability invites manipulation. Consistency is your signature. Be stable under pressure, calm during chaos, controlled when others react emotionally. People remember how you made them feel when things were uncertain. Distance yourself cleanly. Enforce boundaries quietly. Let your absence speak louder than confrontation. When your name is mentioned, it should carry weight before context arrives. A man who controls his reputation controls how others approach him, and approach determines leverage. 7. Make excellence a discipline. Excellence is not talent. It is obedience to standards. Most men wait to feel motivated. Machiavelli respected those who acted regardless of feeling. Discipline separates those who rise from those who rationalize. Do the hard thing first. Keep your word. Show up when no one is watching. These moments forge identity. Comfort breeds mediocrity. Discipline builds dominance. When you repeatedly choose effort over ease, you become reliable to yourself. That trust compounds into confidence no external validation can provide. Machiavelli understood that fortune follows those prepared to endure discomfort. Daily discipline removes dependence on luck. Excellence becomes inevitable when standards are non-negotiable. 8. Become unstoppable. Unstoppable does not mean aggressive. It means unreachable. You are no longer ruled by approval, no longer shaken by opinion, no longer dependent on permission. Machiavelli wrote that the greatest conquest is mastery of the self. When emotions no longer dictate decisions, manipulation fails. You become selective, strategic, calm. Criticism fades. Pressure sharpens you. Obstacles redirect rather than block. At this stage, influence becomes effortless. People feel your stability before you speak. They test less. They respect more. You are no longer reacting to the world. You are shaping it. This is not dominance over others. It is sovereignty over yourself. And once achieved, nothing external can take it from you. Now you've combined all 8. Your mind is now a fortress, insulated from chaos, immune to emotional hijacking. Your silence is loaded, every word deliberate, every pause strategic. Your discipline is visible, not announced, not explained, but felt. You no longer react, you assess. You no longer seek approval. You enforce standards. You no longer confuse kindness with weakness or morality with surrender. This is the shift. You don't switch principles on and off. They fuse into identity. Boundaries become instinct. Clarity becomes default. Excellence becomes routine. People feel something different around you now. Less access, less predictability, more weight. You are not harder. You are clearer. not colder, more controlled, and control is what separates those who are moved by the world from those who move through it, untouched. At this point, power is no longer something you chase. It is something others sense and adjust to. This is what it means to become strategically awake. You didn't just watch this. You shed something. You started as someone explaining themselves, overgiving, absorbing pressure that was never yours to carry. You end as someone who understands leverage, timing, restraint. Your posture has shifted. Your tolerance for nonsense is gone. Your need to be liked has quietly dissolved. You see it now. The patterns, the traps, the unspoken rules. What once confused you feels obvious. What once intimidated you feels small. This is not arrogance, it's alignment. You are no longer reacting from guilt, fear, or habit. You are choosing from clarity. And once that switch flips, there's no returning to who you were, only refining who you are becoming. This is the moment the old version loses authority, and the new one takes the seat. Understand this clearly. The moment you change, the world will test you. People who benefited from your silence will provoke you. People who fed on your guilt will question you. People who thrived on your access will resent your boundaries. This is not resistance. It is confirmation. They are not reacting to your cruelty. They are reacting to your clarity. Stand firm. Do not explain. Do not overcorrect. Do not retreat into old habits to make others comfortable. Your restraint will feel threatening to the undisciplined. Your silence will feel arrogant to the insecure. Your standards will feel unfair to those who never had any. Let them feel it, because what you've built here is not a mood. It is a position. Subscribe if you're done being readable. Share this with someone who's still bleeding for approval, or keep it to yourself. Either way, you're not going back. You are no longer negotiable. You are no longer programmable. You are no longer available for manipulation disguised as virtue. You are calm. You are precise. You are deliberate. And that is what makes you dangerous. You are unbreakable because you no longer bleed for approval. You are unstoppable because you no longer waste energy on battles that don't serve your future. Now go. Not to convince, not to prove, but to execute. Let your life become the evidence. Stay conscious, stay strategic, and above all, stay sovereign.